Summer can be a bit of a slog. For us, it's often for some reason a rather busy time, and I'm sure we're not alone.
Well, you can beat the summertime sadness and the August angst and enhance your everyday with our excellent sponsor, Via Hemp. This is a company that crafts award-winning premium THC and THC-free gummies.
Each of these gummies is especially designed to cultivate a specific mood. Whether you're looking to get relaxed, get quality sleep, get creative, or just to get focused. If you're 21 or older, you can experience it for yourself and get 15% off your first order with our exclusive code MSheet at viahemp.com. That's VIIAHEMP.com.
I personally enjoyed their grapefruit flow state gummies. This CBG and CBD powerhouse really helped me tap into my productivity. Like, we have had an extremely busy summer, and I feel flow state got me over the finish line a few times when I was editing multiple episodes a day, digging through documents, and knocking out a bunch of interviews.
Via Hemp does not require a medical card, and it ships legally to all 50 states. It's also affordable, and even more so for Murder Sheet listeners who get a special deal.
If you're 21 and older, head to viahemp.com and use code MSheet to receive 15% off. That's VIIAHEMP.com and use code MSheet at checkout. After you purchase, they ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Enhance your everyday with Via.
This season, Instacart has your back to school. As in, they've got your back to school lunch favorites, like snack packs and fresh fruit. And they've got your back to school supplies, like backpacks, binders, and pencils. And they've got your back when your kid casually tells you they have a huge school project due tomorrow. Let's face it, we were all that kid. So first call your parents to say I'm sorry, and then download the Instacart app to get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes all school year long. Get a $0 delivery fee for your first 3 orders while supplies last. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
Okay, it's time to commit. 2024 is the year for prioritizing yourself. Begin your new smile journey with Byte, and you could start seeing results in just 2 to 3 weeks. Just order your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95 at Byte.com. Byte clear aligners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces. Plus, they offer financing options, accept eligible insurance, and you can pay with your HSA FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte.
Content warning. This episode includes discussion of domestic violence, murder, suicide, and sexual crimes against children.
Today on the cheat sheet, we'll be taking you through 6 different cases. We're going to be going to Georgia, Florida, Oklahoma, Missouri, Wisconsin, and our own home state of Indiana. We'll be talking about several cold cases, some cases that have not yet been solved, and more than one murder conspiracy case. My name is Anya Kane. I'm a journalist.
And I'm Kevin Greenlee. I'm an attorney.
And this is The Murder Sheet.
We're a true crime podcast focused on original reporting, interviews, and deep dives into murder cases. We're The Murder Sheet.
And this is The Cheat Sheet, Recusals, and Reprisals.
Let's start with a case from down in Georgia, and this one has several sources that we used.
Okay.
Including NBC News, the Daily Mail, 11 Alive, WBRC, WSFA, as well as a press release from the Clayton County Sheriff.
You went all out on this one.
Yes. And it's a very sad case. And it begins all the way back in 2013, or more specifically on January 13th, 2013, when the bodies of Cheryl Colquitt-Thompson, Quinones King, and Rodney Cottrell were all found in Clayton County, Georgia. More specifically, they were found inside a 2010 Dodge Charger that it looked like it had been abandoned. And when police investigated, it became pretty clear that these people not only had been murdered, but they'd actually been tortured before they were murdered. A couple of the victims, it's come out they were beaten and then were smothered and strangled.
That's horrible. Jeez. That's a really brutal death.
Really brutal death for these three people. In any circumstances, that would be very difficult for their families, but in this circumstance, it's always harder when you don't have closure, if closure is even possible, but they didn't know who did it. And it was only very, very recently, within the last week or so, that some arrests were made in this case. The police kept on pursuing it. And the Clayton County Sheriff's Department and Police Department kept on investigating, and they were able to make some arrests. And the people they arrested for this crime were Keante Thompson, Keante Harris, Daryl Harris, and a man named Keante Harris. And what is interesting about this a detail that's caused this to get some interest nationally is that Keante Harris, one of the people arrested for this triple murder, is actually now an assistant principal at a middle school in Alabama.
Oh, no.
Why do you tell me?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's a little bit early. It's always possible that people are wrongfully accused or wrongfully convicted. So I don't want to put the cart before the horse here and say that this must be a bad man working with children. It's always possible that police get it wrong. But if they are accurate and there is a good case against this man, then that's disturbing that he's been working with children for the time, after doing something so horrible.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it on the show before. Comic book guy, comic strip guy. And one of the great crime comic strips out there is Dick Tracy. And the bad guys in Dick Tracy always look bad. They always look monstrous. They have some sort of something wrong with them that you can look at them and tell this is a bad guy. And obviously, real life doesn't work that way. And all of us have within us the potential to be very good or very bad. And perhaps this man was doing some good work with these kids.
Yeah.
Don't know. But that doesn't change the fact that if he is as guilty as charged, he did something horrible that he needs to pay the price for it.
Yeah, I think actually sometimes people want there to be it to be always just a, good or evil issue. And I think that oftentimes people can do really evil things and then go on and maybe live an okay life. And I think that a lot of people have a hard time sitting with that. Everyone has to either be a serial killer or not a serial killer. But I think sometimes you can do that, but that doesn't mean that you should be free from repercussions, even if you're living a decent life afterwards.
And I have a hard time dealing with that sometimes, because the implication of it is that you could be living next door to someone who you think is just a normal, law-abiding person, and who can pass as a normal, decent person, perhaps even do some good works, but in their past, perhaps something horrible has happened.
I mean, I think when you look into situations like genocide or kind of historical evils like that, the Holocaust, World War II, most of the people who perpetuated that were not necessarily sitting around, scheming evil schemes. They perpetuated it because, they were part of that society and they just did it. And that doesn't make it less evil. But it does make it more disturbing because it becomes clear that like anybody, when faced with a choice, can make a very evil choice that wrecks other people's lives, kills other people. And if you're just in an environment that kind of leads to something like that, one would hope that you would make the ethical, moral, and good choice, but that's not always necessarily the case. I think you have killers and famous killers who are, have something psychological with them, or there's something like where they just are compelled to kill again and again. But in many murder situations, it's more of some sort of practical thing. Maybe it's a drug deal. Maybe it's a romantic rival, or someone you have a complicated romantic relationship with. There's a practical side to it. And, I think a lot more people could end up finding themselves in a situation where they can justify something to themselves than we like to think about.
Yeah, I agree completely. So that's what I found most chilling about this is a reminder that a person can do great evil and still have the potential for something else in them and do decent work with kids or with others. So that's that. I find that chilling. I also want to note that the schools where he worked, a spokesman for that school system, Jefferson County School Superintendent, put out a statement basically saying, well, we know he's been arrested. As far as we can tell, it had nothing to do with his employment here.
Well, I would hope not.
So yeah, businesses and schools, they always like to put out statements covering.
We weren't also directly involved in the murders. Yeah. I understand that. I'm sure
as a lawyer, I understand that.
Yeah, I'm sure parents there are freaking out. And again, I'm not going to condemn somebody before there's a trial. There could be more information, or this could turn out to be a misunderstanding. But if it's not, I very much understand the community there being upset by that.
Yeah, and if we take hypothetically that these people are guilty as charged, I'm glad that the families of these victims 13 years later are finally getting some answers for what happened to their loved ones and who was responsible.
Absolutely. Well said.
Have you ever covered a carpet stain with a rug, ignored a leaky faucet, pretended your half-painted living room is supposed to look like that? Well, you're not alone. We've all got unfinished home projects. But there's an easier way. Thumbtack is the app that makes it easier to care for your home. Pull out your phone and in just a few taps, search, chat, and book highly rated pros right in your neighborhood. Download Thumbtack and start caring for your home the easier way.
This episode is sponsored by AutoTrader. Credit scores, down payments, interest rates. Car buying can be a numbers game, but you don't have to be a math expert to get the keys to your dream car. Just use Kelley Blue Book My Wallet on AutoTrader. Crunch your numbers and get your personalized results so you know exactly how much you'll pay each month for your car. It's like having a magic wand for your wallet. Presto! The car you've been wanting is now within reach. So hit the road and leave your calculator at home. Find your next car on autotrader.com.
BP added more than $130 billion to the U.S. economy over the past 2 years by making investments from coast to coast. Investments like acquiring America's largest biogas producer, Archaea Energy, and starting up new infrastructure in the Gulf of Mexico. It's and, not or. See what doing both means for energy nationwide at bp.com/investing in America.
Are you ready to go to Missouri?
Do it.
So this is another case where a family was left waiting for a number of years. Questions still remain, but there seems to be at least some sort of official view of what happened in this case. I'm talking about the Missouri case of John Paul Parton.
What was your source for that?
My source for this one was KSDK. They did some good coverage of it, so check them out, and I would say follow them for updates, because I'm sure there's going to be updates in this case. So John Paul Parton was a 19-year-old. He was in a lot of trouble 3 years ago. He told his family that he and some friends had burglarized a business, and then he and his friends were fighting about how to divide up that stolen money. That's not a good situation to be in, but things got worse. That was the last time his family ever heard from him. So he goes missing. He's been missing since. He is still missing. They do not have a body, but police now have brought charges against one Thomas E. Gamble, who's also known as Tedo. He's a 21-year-old. Police believe that he shot and killed Parsons Parton rather, pardon me, on May 18th, 2021. And they recently arrested him in Louisiana and charged him. So they basically were able to piece a lot of this together through interviews with witnesses. They believe that Gamble and Parton were both part of this dispute over this money for this burglary, and that Gamble shot Parton when they were driving together on Highway 67 in a Toyota Camry. Gamble's sitting in the back, Parton's in the front passenger seat. His body is removed and burned in a bathtub. A number of witnesses came forward to talk about either, they saw that or they helped him clean up the blood afterwards. But essentially his remains were burned and destroyed. So I imagine that's a very agonizing situation for Mr. Parton's family to be in. But there at least is maybe some hope for answers if this case ends up leading to a conviction or a guilty plea. And it goes to show you, I think sometimes there's this idea that like cases where there is no body are impossible to try. And it really depends on the case, I would say. I mean, if you have a lot of evidence otherwise, then I don't think that's as big of a deal.
Yeah, I looked at this some last year when we were discussing another case. I don't even know if we ended up covering that particular case on the program. But it's a complicated thing that maybe when you don't have a body, it's a bit more difficult to actually bring charges. But when you do bring charges, you have a higher chance of getting a conviction, because if you actually bring charges without a body, the odds are you have such strong circumstantial evidence that you're able to get the conviction. Because you don't take the step of bringing charges unless you're like really, really sure you've got a strong case.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you don't do that willy-nilly when you don't even have a body.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So now we've covered so far two murder conspiracies, because I believe the first one, certainly a murder conspiracy where multiple men were involved in this heinous crime. And then at the very least, Gamble had a lot of help in covering this up.
Right.
And seems to have been a conflict amongst a group. But now we have yet another murder conspiracy, but this one is a little bit different in terms of how it all went down. And it has an unusual ending. And I'm going to say, I find myself, when I see certain headlines about crimes, I'm a human being. I get mad sometimes. I'm like, how did this happen? And this is one of those cases where it's really always important to get the context, because otherwise you just get mad, and maybe your anger is understandable, but maybe when you look into it, you're like, oh, I understand why this happened in this way now. So that's my caveat here.
Okay.
Don't get mad. I mean, you can get mad, but just look into it before you start commenting. So my sources for this are News on 6 and the Tulsa World, which I accessed via newspapers.com, a wonderful resource. News on 6 gave me the anger. Tulsa World gave me the context. But both did a great job, so you should check them out. So a man named Neil Sweeney was a beloved businessman and a popular former University of Tulsa football player. He was very well respected in his community, and he worked at a place called Retail Fuels Marketing. That was his business, selling fuel to places like gas stations, convenience stores. He was 63 years old on September 4th, 2008, went to work as normal. He's working at his office in an office complex on 108th East Avenue in Tulsa. Around 9:30, a young man comes up, seems to be in his late teens, early 20s. Witnesses see him. He's driving a white van, and he goes into the office and shoots Neil Sweeney in the head. He dies in the hospital the next day. And a lot of people come to his funeral. Again, this is a very popular man. This is a well-respected man. Very beloved. One man who came to his funeral was a man named Muhammad Aziz. On the surface, he's a successful businessman. He's got 2 convenience stores in Tulsa, one in Collinsville. He's a native of Pakistan, comes to this country, is doing a good job. Founds a business where he's opening multiple locations. But Aziz was not like the other mourners, because he's the one who actually set all this into motion. It turned out that Aziz was having a lot of financial problems. So he stopped paying his fuel bills to Sweeney's company. In response, they stopped delivering gas to his convenience stores. That seems pretty reasonable. In addition, on May 21st, 2008, Sweeney's business got over $200,000 in a default judgment against Aziz. So he's getting more money from him, or at least he gets that judgment. So in 2008, Aziz, after this default judgment, he asks another man named Alan Shields to find a hitman to kill Sweeney. So Alan Shields and his brother Fred Jr. were involved in drug trafficking. And Aziz agreed to pay $10,000 to them to do this, ended up paying over $11,000. But Fred Jr., in response to Alan's request, recruits a man named Tarico Bethel. And they also get a man named Alonzo Johnson, whose job is basically to move the van around. So this is a murder conspiracy. You have a disgruntled businessman who's mad because he is bad at his business and I guess is taking it out on this guy who reasonably wants his money back. And he sets this into motion and basically it all unravels. So in 2009, Bethel gets hit with murder charges. In 2010, Aziz and Alonzo Johnson are charged. And in June of 2010, the Shields brothers are charged. So kind of gets into a matter of culpability. Who's the worst person in this situation? The middlemen who kind of arrange everything and ensure it's going to happen for sure? Is it the trigger man who does the actual killing? Is it the man who wanted Sweeney dead? In 2011, Alan Shields, he's bonded out the previous year. He's at home and he dies by suicide. And then in 2012, Aziz pleads guilty. So that ended up ensuring that Aziz actually got the best sentence of all of them. He's the guy who started all this, but because he flipped on the others, he was able to get the deal. And it's interesting. Tulsa County District Attorney Tim Harris at the time in the newspapers talked about how making a deal with Aziz made his skin crawl, and he literally called it a deal with the devil. But in his mind, it was worth it because it opened up the entire conspiracy, so they were able to get all of these guys rather than, just piecemeal. We know that murder conspiracy cases can be very complicated because you have to link this person to that person. We've covered those on the case. They take a long time. That doesn't mean the police are lazy or the prosecutor's not doing a good job. It's just that it's meticulous work. And if one conviction doesn't go through, then the whole thing could fall apart. So Aziz pleads guilty in January of 2012 to so his charges were solicitation of murder, and in exchange, the prosecutors dismissed the murder and conspiracy charges. The deal called for him to get a prison sentence between 25 and 35 years. District Judge Tom Gillert accepted the recommendation and agreed to give Aziz credit for 1 year, basically set up a pretty sweet credit deal in terms of if you serve this much and you do these classes, you can get out early. And he apparently his Aziz's family was too ashamed to even come support him in the courtroom at that time, according to his attorney, Ken Sue Dorfel. So very recently, Aziz actually got out. Now, Tulsa County Sheriff Vic Regalado, he was one of the detectives on the case. He was in the news talking about how ridiculous it was and how awful it was for the family. Because, according to him, Aziz never even showed remorse about this, and he only ended up serving 11 years of a 32-year sentence. So I very much understand why he feels that way and why the family would feel that way. This is a guy who actually started all of this and ensured, Sweeney would be alive if not for this guy deciding that, his problems were Sweeney's fault, so he's going to take care of it. But at the same time, I would never blame the prosecutor or the judge for this because it sounds like they needed him to get at the wider conspiracy. And I think that was probably important to do at some point. So I'm curious, what do you think about this? What do you think about a complicated case like this where it almost feels unsatisfying because the most the guy who had the like evil intent gets away with it more so than the others. But at the same time, you can kind of understand it.
Yeah, it's really complicated. It's really hard to weigh all of these things. And it's frustrating because at the end of the day, it's like really difficult to say with certainty, oh yeah, absolute justice was done here. Because in the justice system, as in any other endeavor in human life, you have to make compromises.
To me, from the prosecutor's standpoint, he's not only doing this for Neil Sweeney and Neil Sweeney's family, but the community. And if you have a group of guys who successfully start running a murder for hire club or start doing this for other people, you're going to have a wider problem. And when you're dealing with people who are so cold that they're willing to, like, I don't have a beef in this situation, but I'll take your money and I'll make it happen. You need those, they need to not be out here with the rest of us. That's not safe. And so I think I can understand it, even though it does gall me to see headlines like the guy at the center of the murder conspiracy gets the easiest deal, but he was the one who was willing to roll. I guess the others weren't. They didn't make that call and they didn't benefit from it. And, you know, I mean, all of them got way worse sentences than Aziz. So I wonder if they regret that. Like, I wonder if that was something they were offering to everyone and he's just the first one to go for it.
That could very well be the case.
But I would never, I would totally understand why Sweeney's family would be infuriated by this. I hope that they were prepared for this and kind of indicated how early he could get out. 11 out of 32 is pretty early.
That's really, really early.
Yeah. But if a person is motivated to behave themselves in prison and that's the way the deal is set up, then it can happen. But anyway, so that's what happened in Oklahoma.
Well, now we're going to go back to Indiana and get ready for this one. I found this one on Fox 19, which is actually a Cincinnati affiliate. And so for a minute, I thought this was an Ohio case.
You thought it was their problem.
Yes, but actually this is out of Franklin County, Indiana, and Franklin County is actually very, very close to Ohio. And the prosecutor in Franklin County we'll be talking about a bit here is Chris Heuerkamp, and the judge in this case is Judge J. Stephen Cox of the Franklin County Circuit Court. And the judge is going to kind of be the major player here. And I wanted to talk about this case. It's not even a murder case. Usually we try to focus on murder cases because of our name.
We kind of box ourselves in there.
This is actually an attempted murder case. But the reason I wanted to discuss it is because in connection with the Delphi case, there's always a lot of questions like, oh, is the judge doing something wrong? How can we get rid of the judge? Or is the judge is doing something great? We don't need to get rid of her. There's all this discussion about the judge and the judge's conduct. And in this case, as I will explain in a moment, the prosecutor is actually asked for the judge to be removed from the case. As I say, my main source for this was initially an article on Fox 19, but then I went, since it was an Indiana case and we have access to Indiana legal documents, I went and I got a bunch of court documents on this case, which also provided a lot of additional information. So this case involves a man named Gregory Guilfoyle. Back on December 22nd of 2022, he allegedly shot his wife at their home. And then afterwards, he ran outside with his 23-month-old daughter, very cold temperatures, and he shot at a sheriff's deputy who was wearing bodily armor. The sheriff's deputy fires back and wounds Guilfoyle to the point that he is now a paraplegic and has limited use of one of his arms. And the mental state of Guilfoyle is a crucial issue. Was he mentally ill or what have you? Okay, so take all of that in mind. This was set for trial earlier this year. And shortly before the trial, the defense attorneys provided the prosecution with just a huge list of mental health experts that they wanted to call to discuss the mental state of Mr. Guilfoyle.
Okay, makes sense.
They did this at the last minute.
Oh, the last minute. That doesn't make sense.
And so the prosecutor, Mr. Heuerkamp, wanted there to be a continuance in the case so that he could have the time to figure out what all these witnesses had to say and to prepare to deal with them. And the Judge Cox, firmly refused. Absolutely not. No delays. And so Prosecutor Heuerkamp then files to dismiss the charges against Mr. Guilfoyle, explaining, I'm only dismissing these because I'm not ready for the case because of all these additional witnesses. As soon as I prepare to deal with these witnesses, I will refile the case.
Okay.
So it's interesting that the judge wouldn't grant that continuance and made the prosecutor jump through that procedural hoop, but he did. And so now just within the last few days, the charges against Mr. Guilfoyle have been refiled. And along the way, the prosecutor is also asking for the judge to be recused. And his basis for that is interesting.
Uh-oh.
As I've noted, the mental state of the defendant is crucial. It turns out that at different points, the judge, for whatever reason, took it upon himself to go visit the defendant at the home of his parents.
No. What?
And have interactions with him and then base some of his ideas and impressions of the man's mental state upon those interactions. And so judging by your reaction, you realize that's not good.
What? Why?
Unclear why. But let's
Is he friends with his parents?
Doesn't seem to be.
Just casually. Oh my God. Okay. That's not what I expected at all.
And so that's the problem. We always talk about how you don't want jurors to go into a situation where they're making a decision or rendering a verdict based on information they've heard outside of the courtroom. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One is that you want the decision they reach to be informed. You want it to be based on evidence that is legally sound and should be introduced in court. And another reason, of course, is that you don't want a verdict against you to be based upon evidence you haven't had a chance to rebut.
Yeah.
So the same general principles apply to judges. When the judge makes decisions based upon...
Your parents have a charming home, and I was very entertained this evening.
Yeah, he should be making his conclusions about the mental state of the defendant based on what's introduced in court.
Not like vibes at home.
Yes. Not on anything else other than what's in court. So the prosecutor said, this isn't right. You need to recuse yourself. And so...
Let me guess. He did not.
Well, you're absolutely right. But you're also absolutely wrong. The judge issued a ruling saying, you know what? If you had a problem with me doing this, you should have told me a long time ago.
Before I made all those appointments with them. My social calendar is very booked.
The argument he tries to make is that previously, before you dismissed the first case, you knew about all that stuff, and you should have complained about it much, much earlier. So because of that...
Because you were frozen in horror.
Because of that, I'm not going to recuse myself. But then, immediately afterwards...
Oh, God.
He issues another motion where he says, well, I'm going to recuse myself, just myself, based upon what I think is right, not on anyone else's.
Guilfoyle's parents told me it was cool, so I'm going to just go ahead and do that.
And what he said there is, after the case was dismissed, some members of the public asked me about the rule and why a case would be dismissed. And I answered those questions in what I thought was a neutral way. But, maybe some of those people got the wrong impression from what I said. So
I did invite them to Guilfoyle's parents' house, so maybe that's why.
So because of that, I'm going to appoint someone else to do the case instead of me. So he wants to, he's agreeing to remove himself from the case, but basically he's not doing it for the reason the prosecutor says, and he's doing it on his own, and he's rejecting the prosecutor's reasoning.
It just seems like a desperate face-saving attempt.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I'm very, very curious about what the heck is going on in the legal community in Franklin County, Indiana. And if anybody is listening.
If you know the tea, if you know the Franklin County tea, please spill it. Send it to our murdersheet@gmail.com. We want to know what the heck. How?
Because here's the thing, too. Prosecutor Hewerkamp, if he's the county prosecutor, he has to regularly practice in front of this judge.
That's what I was going to say.
So for him to be so upset that he is willing to ask the judge to recuse himself, he must be really, really upset.
Okay, just from what I've heard, unless there's some factors in this that we're just not considering and that we're just not aware of, Hewerkamp's totally in the right. This guy shouldn't be doing this. This is ridiculous. Also, I'm assuming if he's a judge, he should know that. I don't even understand. I've never heard of a judge making house calls before like this. It's just bizarre. I would be very concerned. And as you said, he lit this bridge on fire. And that is something. Listen, when we talk about the Delphi case, we're talking about attorneys Bradley Rosie, who's based in the Logansport area, which is not far from Delphi, and Andrew Baldwin, who's based in Franklin, Indiana, which is quite far from Delphi. And neither of them practice in front of Judge Gull regularly. So if they really tick her off and they all leave hating each other, that doesn't matter because they're not Fort Wayne attorneys. They're not going to have to see her again unless I don't know, unless unforeseen circumstances intervene. So when they push her, it kind of is like they can get away with that to a certain extent. But you can't, if we were talking about the relationship between former Circuit County Court Judge Ben Diener and Nicholas McClellan, the prosecutor in Carroll County, those are people who have to get along because they're going to be he's going to be trying a lot of cases in front of Diener. So you don't want to just say kick Diener off the case in a situation like this unless you're really prepared to go to war later on.
Yeah.
Or there. I mean, I don't know. I don't understand this, Kevin.
There's lots of colorful details in this motion from the prosecutor. I'll read you a little bit of it here.
Please do.
On February 2nd, 2024, the undersigned and defense counsel participated in the deposition of the defendant's father, Thomas Guilfoyle. During the course of his deposition testimony, he described a personal and unannounced visit to his home by Judge Cox on a date that is believed to have occurred while the case was pending, subsequent to the defendant's release on bond. Mr. Guilfoyle testified that Judge Cox arrived at the door, entered the home, and went into the room occupied by the defendant, approached the defendant's bed, and began to inquire as to the defendant's well-being. And he was there for about 15 minutes. So this is bizarre.
Okay, sometimes judges make mistakes, or judges make decisions that might be, considered baffling. But then when you look into it, you understand it. I was just talking about a case where it was like you could blame the judge, but then you look closely and the judge was doing based what the prosecutor asked him to do, and it was reasonable. But then there's cases like this where you look closer into it and you're like, I'm more confused now.
Yeah, I'm very confused. I'm very interested about Franklin County, Indiana. Next time we go to Cincinnati, maybe we should
should swing by, see if we can get some invites. I find this troubling, Kevin.
And meanwhile, it's kind of overshadowing the original crime, which is
pretty horrible in and of itself, frankly.
Yeah, the victims deserve justice, and a lot of this stuff. It just seems.
And if this guy is mentally ill or there's some situation like that, then he should be getting some support there and figure it out. But and
the way to determine if Mr. Guilfoyle is mentally ill or not is to have him examined by skilled professionals who are well qualified to make such determinations and not have unannounced house calls from a judge.
I'm sure judges and lawyers do not like it when non-judges and lawyers just make, kind of non-legally sound, stupid pronouncements based on their jobs. But I mean, I would hope that judges and lawyers would also widely recognize that other professions, i.e. mental health experts, feel the same way when they do it.
And I think you said you had another non-murder case.
Yeah, well, yeah. Let's go to Wisconsin. Let's get the heck out of Franklin County, Indiana. And we're going to go back to a case that we've covered before. We've gotten a consistent request from a listener to keep this in the public eye because there's a feeling that this is not being covered well in the area in Wisconsin for whatever reason. There can be a lot of, that's not to sound conspiratorial. Local news is struggling, so sometimes there's just not the resources to do what could have been done 20 years ago. So that's, or maybe I should say 30 or 40 years ago. But this has to do with Stephen James Weiss, former IT employee for the Freighter Hospital. That is an affiliate for the Medical College of Wisconsin. It's a big employer. And he previously worked at the Freighter West Bend Clinic that's since been torn down in West Bend, Wisconsin, and the Freighter West Bend Hospital. He's done a lot of things, but he's basically accused of being a stalker and a sexual offender. And he's accused of putting cameras in women's bathrooms and recording women using the restroom, and just really horrifying and disgusting crimes around that. So what recently happened in that case, the big update, is he got hit with 15 additional charges, all for possession of child pornography, and all for an offense date of July 14th, 2023. And the state, represented by prosecuting attorney Grant D. Scaife, says the investigation is mostly done. They don't anticipate any new charges. But, I mean, 15 new charges is quite a lot. And that will be all going forward. On the next hearing is June 6th, 2024 at 1:30 p.m. So that's the update on that one. Continues to develop, but just a very disturbing case all around. And now I think for the last case we're going to cover today, we're going to go to Florida. And my sources for this one are local10.com, 7 News Miami, the Miami Herald, and Project Cold Case. This is a very upsetting set of cases for so many reasons, but I will tell you, I was like tearing up and crying reading about this because I just feel so bad for this family. This family has been through more than any family should have to go through. So let's go back to May of 2003. Sunday, May 25th, 2003. It's Memorial Day weekend. A young 24-year-old named Keante Harris is out with friends going to South Beach, Florida. She had just recently graduated from Florida State University. She had a promising future. She got her bachelor's in criminal justice, and she was thinking about law school. She was very, very dedicated to her 3-year-old son, DeMarco Harris, and wanted to support him, and so was thinking about what sort of future she would pursue in order to support him as a mother and to further her own career prospects. And she's dropped off at her house after this trip early in the morning, around 6:30 a.m. I've seen as one of the times reported. At 6:51 a.m., somebody at the house calls 911 and hangs up immediately. Another 911 call comes in 3 minutes later, and this one connects. And Carmen tells the dispatcher that she'd been stabbed. She described the perpetrator as a black man and said that she did not know this person. She was airlifted to the hospital where she died. So just a senseless murder. There's no sign of robbery in the house. There's no sign of sexual assault. Somebody just comes in, stabs her, and leaves. This case is still unsolved. So her son, DeMarco Harris, grows up without his mom, but his grandmother and his aunts, Carmen's sisters, band together to raise him. He attends Miami Northwestern High School. he was one of the football players on the team and actually helped his team get to the state title in 2017. So, and then in the meantime, he's trying to pay off his car. He's a young man. He's also 24. So he starts working as an Uber driver, a rideshare driver in Miami. And so he was recently taking a break, seemingly, resting very late at night, or early in the morning, I should say, in the parking lot behind the Sylvester Cocktail Bar, which is across from the shops at Midtown Miami, if you know Miami. And somebody stole his 2020 gray Honda Accord and shot him to death. So he was murdered at the same age that his mother was murdered all those years ago, and now both cases are currently unsolved. And I don't even know what to say. I mean, what
that poor family.
What a horrible, horrible, horrible situation. And both of these, no one ever deserves to get murdered, obviously. I don't care whether you're like selling drugs or doing whatever, but you know, he was just trying to earn some money to pay off a car doing rideshare. It terrifies me how dangerous it seems like rideshare driving can be sometimes for people, especially people who are just considered contractors by the law and not even employees. You know, I don't know what the answer is to protecting people in those environments, but it just seems like those folks are taking an awful amount of risk, and it does not seem fair. And then his mother, you know, just getting back from a vacation, just, I don't know. It's just, they both seem like very special, nice people who are beloved by their families. And now the family is going through the same exact horrifying loss that they went through all those years ago. And it just made me really sad reading some of their quotes. You know, they don't deserve this. It's just, I really hope that, I don't know, at least DeMarco's case gets solved quickly. If you know anything about it, call 305-471-8477. That's Crime Stoppers. There's a $5,000 reward for DeMarco's case. And I hope that there's also progress made on Carmen's case, because, I mean, just a double tragedy for this family. And just, I mean, just how horrifying to experience that and then suddenly experience it again without, yeah.
Yeah, two people in the prime of their lives.
Yeah, just horrible. So
decades apart.
Very, very haunting, and our hearts go out to the Harris's family. I mean, this shouldn't have happened.
We thank you for listening, but before we go, we did want to make one quick announcement. People have been asking us ever since the contempt hearing last month, where David Hennessy was making comments about murder sheet people. People were asking us to basically sell T-shirts to say murder sheet people. So we have had such T-shirts created. They have the same artwork that you see on your podcast player.
They look really cool.
And so we are selling these shirts, and if you are interested, you can find said shirts at murdersheetshop.com. And we appreciate your interest.
Thanks, everyone, so much for listening.
Okay, bye. Thanks so much for listening to The Murder Sheet. If you have a tip concerning one of the cases we cover, please email us at murdersheet@gmail.com. If you have actionable information about an unsolved crime, please report it to the appropriate authorities.
If you're interested in joining our Patreon, that's available at www.patreon.com/murdersheet. If you want to tip us a bit of money for records requests, you can do so at www.buymeacoffee.com/murdersheet. We very much appreciate any support.
Special thanks to Kevin Tyler Greenlee, who composed the music for The Murder Sheet, and who you can find on the web at kevintg.com.
If you're looking to talk with other listeners about a case we've covered, you can join the Murder Sheet discussion group on Facebook. We mostly focus our time on research and reporting, so we're not on social media much. We do try to check our email account, but we ask for patience as we often receive a lot of messages. Thanks again for listening.